How you going, guys? Curtis from Cutting Edge Engineering. So today's job, we're going to get started on our Frena-Crane project. There is quite a big list of things I need to do to the crane. Today we are going to get started on doing the boom lift cylinders. But before we get started on that, we thought we'd give you a bit of an update. When we did the video with the tour of the crane, a lot of viewers commented with different things about the crane. A couple of viewers did mention on the boom there is actually a manual extension. There is a pin you can remove, and you can manually extend the last stage again. I did wonder what that pin was for, but I didn't go and investigate it. I don't know how long it is yet because I haven't pulled it out. I don't want to go and break any cables or do anything silly, so I will investigate that at a later date. But if you thought the crane already extended pretty far, it does go a lot further. One of the other common comments we got was to check the glow plugs on the engine. That could be a reason why it's struggling to start. Well, that can't be the case because this particular engine does not have glow plugs, so that's not it. So you might have noticed when I started the crane, I didn't need to use aero start. The crane just started and ran. We've pretty much eliminated anything to do with it being a fuel problem. So I did eliminate the fuel shutdown solenoid. We replaced that. It is working just fine. The lift pump is supplying plenty of fuel into the mechanical pump of the engine, and the mechanical pump is supplying enough fuel to the injectors. So the fuel system is eliminated from the problem. And there was another comment from another viewer. He actually knows this crane really well. So this crane started out in central Queensland at a coal mine, and I knew that because of all the coal dust around the machine. Something else he mentioned is it was in their wash bay, so that does explain the rust in the cab. He actually said that the crane had done 12,000 hours and they then decided to change out the engine. Maybe it was getting tired. Whoever changed out the motor obviously made a few mistakes, and that's what led to all the issues. The wiring has been chopped and changed, and we found rubbed through wires. We found a lot of weird stuff that shouldn't be in a circuit the way this is set up. There was a lot of dodgy wiring done in behind the dashboard. Power wires had been jumped over to different circuits in order to power something else. So we started troubleshooting the electrical issues. I did go through and change out a couple of dodgy looking fuses, fixed up a little bit of wiring, and then the crane refused to start. I'm not sure exactly what had happened, but 3 days later we finally get the crane to start again, but every time we'd try and put it into gear, it would shut the crane down. You'd start it again, try and use the hydraulics, and it would shut the crane down. It just opened up a whole new can of worms. So what we found in behind the dashboard is someone had stolen power from the ignition system to run the crane safe screen, and then they'd also pulled wiring from the fuse box up to the screen as well. So after we unplugged that, everything started to come come back to life and everything started to work again. So because we disabled all of the crane safe mechanism for the hydraulic system, we have had to put in a missile switch in order to turn on the solenoids so the hydraulics are going to work. It's just one switch and we can use the boom and the winch. And when we're not using it, we just switch it off. So after we do the wiring on the crane and we get everything fixed, we will reinstall the crane safe system by running its own power wires from the battery. So after going through all that, I believe the best thing we need to do is change the entire wiring harness. But I'm not going to do that straight away because that's going to mean ripping the cab apart, and because I'm going to be rebuilding the cab anyway, I'm going to open that can of worms when I do that. So with all that said, we're now going to start removing the boom lift cylinders. But before I start pulling off hoses and removing pins, I do need to make everything safe. So we're going to use our old yard crane to hold the boom up while I remove the boom lift cylinders. So let's get on to that. Right, so in order to remove the boom lift cylinders, we do need to remove the 4 pins that attach them, the lights, plus all the hydraulic hoses. Alright, I'm going to get a wedge to drive in between the 2 pins and hopefully it'll start to move. I can't believe that moved. Righto, so that worked out pretty well. The pin wasn't seized in. We were able to draw it out using a come along and the forklift. Ideally, you probably could have used a slide hammer, but I don't know where mine is. So now that we got that one out of the way, we're going to go down to the bottom of the cylinder, try and remove the bottom pin. Once I do that, I can then bring the cylinder forward so I can access the hydraulic hoses. Yeah, that's tight. So that pin is extremely tight. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use some emery tape and try and remove as much of the paint from the back side of the pin as possible. And then we're going to try and draw it out using some threaded rod and a piece of pipe. I'm not going to try the forklift and the come along because it only just got the front pin out, and this one is a lot tighter. There's a spherical bearing in there, let's tighten that. Whew. Righto, so we got that pin out. That pretty much fought us the whole way. Just turned out to be a bit of rust on the pin that caused it. That's a pitted bit. Now we've got to get the hoses undone. So these really don't have a great deal of access in order to get to the hoses while their cylinders are still fitted onto the machine. So you've sort of got to undo them, pull them forward so you can then access the hoses. I haven't been greased through that for a long time. Righto, so that cylinder is now free of the machine. Probably the worst bit of that was getting those pins out. The bottom pin was definitely pretty difficult, but the next cylinder should be a little bit easier because we can actually use a sledgehammer and a drift and drive the pins out now that there's nothing blocking them. So we'll get this one out of the way, get the next one down. Righto, so that pin came out nice and easy. We need to get the bottom pin off now and the hoses. And in case you're wondering what this scale is on the side of the lift cylinder, that is basically an angle meter with a little ball in it. And as you lift it, it rotates around it and it will tell you the degrees that the boom is on. So on this cylinder there are also 2 pressure solenoids and they go back to the crane safe system. So we don't want to damage those. Once we get those out of the way, we can undo the hoses and take out the cylinder. Righto guys, so the 2 boom lift cylinders are now off the crane. While they're off, I am going to change out the 4 hydraulic hoses that power them. They are in pretty bad condition and they are quite difficult to access while the cylinders are on the machine. What I'm going to do is attach the new hoses onto the cylinders after they've been rebuilt. Then I'll refit the cylinders with the hoses and just have a lot more room to work with where the hose is attached to the valve block. So the next thing I need to do is disassemble the cylinders, but before I take them in the workshop, I need to give them a really good wash down. Righto, now that those are clean, we can start the disassembly process, but before I start pulling the cylinder apart, I do need to remove the spherical bearings out of the end of the barrels, and I want to do that first so I've got a nice area to clamp down with the press, and with the spherical bearings in there, I wouldn't be able to do that, and this will give me a good chance for me to have a good look at the bearings and make sure they're okay. So first thing I'm going to do is remove the snap rings and I can get it set up in the press. So I've got the spherical bearing out. It's not in too bad a condition, but I am going to replace them. What the manufacturer has done is they've used a sleeve to reduce the ID of the bearing to suit the pins on the crane. So that's pretty common when you're trying to give something enough load carrying capacity, but you don't want to oversize everything else. So they've just put a reducing sleeve in there, and they've also used that as the spacer to keep the cylinder in the center of the ears. There's no air in the system, doesn't want to fight you. Good. And a strut. Whole rod's destroyed. Oh no. Ain't gonna work, bro. But we're making a spanner. Righto, so my big Stilsons don't actually fit the gland nut. The likelihood of me doing these again is very slim. Rather than go and buy another bigger pair of Stilsons that I probably won't use or spend a couple of hours making up a proper spanner, I'm just gonna make a simple spanner out of some scrap parts that I've had laying around here in the workshop. Oh, I didn't even need a spanner. Isn't that all the way to the shoulder? That's not a good sign. That's not a really good sign. It looks like we've got metal impregnated into the wear bands, which could be the chrome layer coming off up the other end has made its way through the barrel. Once the cylinder barrel is drained, I'll give it a good clean out, have a good look down the inside and see if there's any scratches or damage.
Oh.
Oh, they're deep too. It goes the whole length. So I didn't even need to clean that out to see the damage inside the barrel. It has got scores running the whole length of the barrel, and it looks like there's been some moisture sitting in the top, and there is a lot of surface rust there. And I can't just hone the barrel out and put a larger diameter seal in, because that would mean I would have to get a seal company to remake the seals oversized. And to hone it out, I would still have to remove the end of the barrel in order to hone all the way through it. So it's not cost effective to do that. It is much faster just to buy a new piece of material and make a new barrel. So unfortunately, not only do we need to replace the rods, it looks like we'll be changing out the barrel on this cylinder anyway. We're going to get this one out of the press, get the other one set up, pull it apart and have a look at it. pork.
But
Yummy. No, we're done. Oh, this one's worse. Look at that. Righto, so this barrel is actually worse than the first one, so we will be rebarreling both of them. Next thing we need to do is get the rod set up in the press so we can retrieve the piston, the gland, and the gland nut and have a look and see what sort of condition they're in. Take these off. Sometimes they hide a grub screw under them. I don't know if they do this. Nothing. There was an O-ring under there. Right. Oh, that's how old school it is. It's a rolling seal. No steel cage. Righto guys, so we got our first rod disassembled. The piston is in really good condition, so we're going to be reusing that. What I originally thought was the gland. It doesn't have any seals in it or any wear bands, so it is just a cast iron bearing that lives in the top of the cylinder, and that is to keep the rod central to the barrel. This is quite old technology. We don't really do this anymore with cylinders. It does look pretty nasty. I am going to sandblast that and see if it's okay. If we can reuse it, I will machine a groove for a wear band to go into that, and that will keep hard surfaces off hard surfaces, and it will prolong the life of the cylinder. And the gland nut that holds the bearing in place, it is what carries all of the seals. It had a pressure seal in there and a wiper seal. We'll give all that a clean up, make sure everything's okay. If it is, these are pretty much the only parts out of the cylinder we are actually going to reuse. So now we'll get the second rod disassembled and see what condition all of that's in. We have an intact O-ring. Righto guys, so I've got our two boom lift cylinders completely disassembled. It has turned into a much bigger job than I'd first planned. So you'll have to stay tuned for part 2 where we get into remanufacturing these cylinders. Thanks for watching.
Put it in view. This is our product placement.
Actually, we had one of our viewers who's actually a mate of mine, also has a YouTube channel. His dad wanted one of our coffee cups and he said they make the perfect cup of tea. I don't know what that means because tea is tea as far as I'm concerned. Righto guys, so our tomb boom lift power those, they do look...
Lou!
Now that I've got the Right, ready?
Yeah.
But the gland is not actually a gland, it is a web... Fuck off plane. Start a new one. You can do fuck offs everything. Fuck off compressor. Fuck off bird. Fuck off Russell. Right, so with all that said... Oh, fuck.
The forklift is what's moving, not the pin. Do you need me to hold it? Oh. Holy moly.
Fashion bear trap.
What was that?
Hornet's nest.
Oh, great. Welcome to Australia.
Yeah, see?
Was that in there?
Yeah, something boom.
Yeah, my eye! Downwind!
Go upwind, dummy.
Did you need a longer sling?
I think it's long enough.
That sounds so terrible. Oh. Lovely.
Oh, double fuck.
The poor GoPro. Hang on. What did you hit? Is the camera still good? Okay.